بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. I'm just gonna go through some things regarding this session 3, which is needs and desires. So this is again for the teachers only, for the reference. So in the session we looked at the universal human needs and how these relate to the human components in the session when we covered it. So these are the 10 universal needs, and we looked at how each one was related to the different components of the body. And then at the end, I asked, that we asked the students to do a little activity. So we mentioned, can you write the various needs of the body, mind, heart, and spirit in order in which is most important to you? So basically, what we were doing was getting them to think about, how they're fulfilling their needs, in what order. And then we mentioned like how which of the needs do you feel you're fulfilling in a positive way, and which of the needs do you feel are you fulfilling in a negative way. So what I'm going to do, inshallah, now I'm just going to go through examples of people who are fulfilling their needs in positive and negative ways, just to give example, inshallah. So so I'm going to go through some examples now of how people are fulfilling their needs in positive and negative ways. So the first one is the friends of Allah. And if you see here, the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the awliya, for this category of people, they're, they are um, fulfilling their needs. Basically, they're worshipping and doing service uh, in order to fulfill their spiritual needs. Because if you remember, we mentioned that they don't have any needs or desires from these acts. And we mentioned that an act that fulfills the spiritual need is when the person sacrifices the needs and desires, and that's when it fulfills the needs of the spirit. Yeah, so this is a true worship and service, because it becomes like the angelic worship who have no needs and desires. However, the difference between the worship and service of the angels is that between the worship of the friends of Allah and the worship of the angels is that the worship of the friends is not their sustenance. So they have to sacrifice, and that's why their worship is higher than angels. Angels and worship and do service. Uh, Basically, their worship and service is their natural sustenance, their food, and they don't have a choice as well. Because they're commanded by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to do it. So, so basically, what it's showing here is that the worship and service is linked to the person's needs of the spirit. And also, if you look here, the worldly acts for these people are linked to the needs of the spirit and also needs of the body, mind, heart, and desires of the soul. So what this basically means is that even their worldly acts like work, family, personal things are also worldly acts which are related to different aspects of their life. They're also fulfilling their spiritual needs because, for example, when they work because of the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only, because they've annihilated their desires and the love of Allah. So that's why it's mentioned in the hadith that I become his hands with which he holds. So even though they're fulfilling their worldly need as they're human beings, and obviously they have needs, but at the same time becomes like a spiritual need because they've annihilated their own will and desire. So they only perform worldly duties by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they've reached a certain station. So here, look, if you look here, um, so it's linked to both. So obviously they have worldly needs they need to fulfill, but at the same time, because they don't do it from their own uh, will and desire, it becomes a need of the spirit as well at the same time. So these people basically they're like meeting their needs in the best way, closest to Sunnah, and they have the most perfect life balance. Okay, so this is the order, like we mentioned before. They're giving the correct priorities to the needs. So they've got spiritual needs, needs of the body, mind, and heart, and desires of the soul. So then after that, you have the pious and righteous. And basically these people, they're like the practicing believers. So for the pious, basically what's happening here is that rather than worldly acts fulfilling the needs of the spirit and the needs of the body, mind, and heart, it's the opposite. So here, their worship and service is fulfilling the needs of the spirit and the needs of the body, mind, and heart, and the desires. So if you remember, we mentioned um, what's happening here is that the pious and the righteous, they perform acts of worship and service, uh, but they have other needs as well sometimes. Yeah. So we discussed this in the value section. So the spirit, even though it's a spirit, they perform spiritual acts because they are sacrificing. They do sacrifice their needs and desires, but they still have other needs. So it's partially the spirit benefits as well, but at the same time, they're fulfilling other needs of the like nafs and stuff like that, like enjoyment they get from the worship. So 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 yeah, that's the basically regards to the pious people and the worldly acts that they do. They do to fulfill the needs of the body, mind, and heart, etc., and the desires. Yeah, but when they do these worldly acts, because they have an ultimate ends value, which is akhirah, which is the pleasure of Allah. This also then becomes an act of worship. So remember the difference here. Even though it's not an act in relation to the purpose, or it's not a spiritual need as such, but out of the fazl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it also becomes worship because the person makes his ultimate aim the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the insan has needs unlike the angels, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this as like worship as well. So alhamdulillah, these people, that generally they're meeting their needs and desires in positive ways always as well, but rarely sometimes they can, sometimes they can meet them very rarely in a detrimental way as well, but mostly they are meeting them in a positive way. And then you have the sinful and the egoistic uh, person who basically is similar to the previous one, you could say. No, sorry, no, that he's not similar to the previous one. This person is basically he's what he's doing is um, he is fulfilling his so the worship that he's doing and the uh, service that he's doing. Yeah, even though it might be might be some sincerity in there, but mainly it's for his evil desires of the soul. So basically, he's maybe mainly doing it for riyah. There's a lot of riyah in there and elements of sincerity. So this person, obviously, he has imbalance in his priorities, and mainly it's what he does is mainly for the pleasure of the nafs and the evil desires and the needs of the body, etc., etc. So the worldly actions that this person does is to fulfill his own needs and evil and egoistic desires. So, for example, a person, he earns wealth, to negatively compete with others and to boast amongst others. So that's the purpose of why he's doing, does worldly actions. So it's more egoistic kind of tendencies he has and evil desires. So basically, these type of people, uh, they're like, by and large, you could say they are generally, their needs are fulfilled and desires are fulfilled in a negative way. But you could say sometimes it's also positive as well on occasions. But they have the wrong order of priority, so they put the spiritual needs at the bottom and they put the needs of the body, mind, and heart at the top. So that's the problem there as well. The next type of people, the animalistic people, basically, what is basically these people have no acts of prayer or worship. They're just concerned with the needs of the body, mind, heart, and desires only. So again, these people are fulfilling their needs in a destructive way, as they're not fulfilling their spiritual needs, and the needs that they are fulfilling, it's not in accordance to the laws of God. So they may steal, etc., to earn wealth. Um, and so the difference between the egoistic and the animalistic type of person in terms of the desires is that the egoistic type of person this has um, evil desires, yeah, whereas the animalistic has selfish desires. For example, we gave the example previously about the negatively competing with others in an egoistic way. So that's the egoistic type of person. So he has evil desires, egoistic desires, whereas the animalistic person is just concerned about themselves and their personal needs and desires. So this type of person may even harm others, but not because of egoistic reasons, but because of their survival tendencies, which are found in animals as well. So let's just to give you an example, like snake. If you come near to the snake, it will bite you, but only if it thinks that it will be harmed. Or it's like the dog, for example, and they harm you if they need to eat in order to survive. So it's due to survival instincts. Yeah, they harm you, for example. It's not like the egoistic person who harms you because of his ego. Yeah. So again, these people they have they don't have the spiritual desire, spiritual needs, and generally their needs are being fulfilled in negative ways. And after that, you got basically the humanistic. Yeah. So the humanistic, so these are like, for example, non-Muslims or secular type of Muslims. So they don't perform acts of worship. However, they do perform acts of service to help others. But because they don't have an ultimate ends value to please Allah, they don't get rewarded in the Akhirah. And the acts of service that they do perform are for their own gratification or for of the self. So the worldly acts that they perform here are to fulfill their worldly needs and desires. However, the difference between the humanistic and the animalistic and shaitanic, the difference between the difference between the humanistic and the animalistic and the egoistic person is that the humanistic person tries to not harm others whilst fulfilling his worldly needs and desires. So, for example, they'll say, for example, we fulfill our desires as long as others are not harmed, whereas the animalistic and egoistic people they harm others for their own benefit. So you could say that these people are fulfilling their desires in mainly destructive ways, as they don't have any reward in the akhirah. However, there's still good and positive elements as they don't harm others as well. Again, so these are the order of their priority of their needs and desires. So the last one is shaitanic people. So the next one, the Shaitanic people. Uh, so what it is, these people they can even perform acts of worship and service. But these people, what it is, it's completely hypocrisy. So their worship and their service is just evil desires only. It's fulfill their evil desires, like the Munafiqs at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, who used to pray. Or in the Hadith, it mentions about the three types of people who will be thrown into hellfire. So these people are just, hypocrites who perform these acts of ibadah and worship. And their worldly acts also is just to fulfill their shaitanic desires, evil desires, which they fulfilled in a very extremely destructive and harmful way. Because everything they do, end goal they have in mind is to harm themselves and others. So these people have become like complete slaves to shaitan and evil desires. And when a person becomes like this, he just ends up harming others intentionally. So he's intentionally planning to harm other people all the time. It becomes his nature to just think and plot and plan, harming other people, disobeying Allah, rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spreading fitna on the earth, because they've made it their life's objective. Whereas the egoistic person, he's just maybe doing it because of his nature, intrinsic nature, to harm other people, but it's not like his life's purpose or anything like that. It's just because that's his nature. Whereas these people are like shaitani people. They're like, become evil. You know, the qualities of set inside them now, and they become evil qualities, and they made it their life's purpose to harm other people. So that's the difference. So that's why it's important. So this, inshallah, I went through these different. These are the order of the needs in which the and the desires in which the shaitanic people are fulfilling. So if you look at they have the shaitanic evil desires of the soul at the top because they made the ultimate purpose in life to go against, to fulfill the desires, even sometimes at the expense of their own needs as well. So that's why it's like this. So Hamza, this the purpose of this session is just to give us a bit of an insight in terms of how the different types of people and how they're fulfilling their needs in positive and destructive ways. So it just gives you a bit of a background information so that when we do this activity with the students, inshallah, you're more aware of of the background to this and the types of people. Jazakallah.